Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to do a VR to Mnomquah and many other people who have done the trad witch tag / untrad witch tag. I watched a lot of VRs when the video first came out. But like a couple of others who have done VRs, I was getting some imposter syndrome and felt like, oh, I'm not traditional enough to do the tag. And I know in the original that they do specify that like anyone can do the tag, but until this morning when I saw Astral Lady Tarot and Candy Soul and Soils VRs, up until that point I didn't really feel like I could respond, but I do think it is important to share your experience, even if it is not, especially if it is not similar to other people's. That is how we learn, that is how we grow, that is how we figure out what does work for us. So after going through the questions and thinking about it some more, I figured I would do a VR. All right, so I'm just gonna dive right in. I've got my notes over here, so if I keep looking down, that's why. Question number 1, what kind of craft do you practice? And then they list a whole bunch. I'm definitely shortening some of the questions just because that's just how I wrote them down. But what kind of craft do I practice? I think when I was first starting out, I was much more concerned with labels and putting every facet of my craft in a box, which is fine. Like, labels can be important and they bring a sense of community and inclusion. So if you had asked me 2 years ago, I would have said that I am an eclectic pagan witch. Probably some polytheism thrown in there too. Nowadays, I don't really follow any labels. If I had to give myself a label, I'd say an eclectic witch. Like, not that it's changed very much, but I just don't really focus on labels as much nowadays. And my practice is still evolving. I love learning about other different kinds of religions and cultures as long as they are open. And I have for years, so I think that will always be part of my craft, is sort of learning about other crafts and seeing what really resonates with me, because that's the biggest part of mine, and the reason I don't really follow many labels now is I just do what resonates with me. And now I focus a little bit more on, or I'm in the process of learning and interested in incorporating more of the practices of the indigenous, let me rephrase. I'm very interested in learning about the indigenous tribes of where I currently reside, and I'm much more interested in learning and incorporating practices of my ancestors. Again, there's a lot that I love to learn about, but not everything that I learn about will be something that I incorporate into my practice. Yeah, and like I touched on it, like I'm interested in learning about closed practices, but in no way, shape, or form am I going to incorporate those into my practice if it's not open to me. Yeah, I think that answers the first question. Question 2, what paradigm, faith, or philosophy informs your craft? For me, it's also a little bit of a couple different things. Definitely animism. That's something that just being out in nature more has really solidified that I've always believed in animism. Everything does have energy. Whether you call that a soul or spirit, that's something that only you can define for your practice. For me, I really like saying energy, because then it's also, for me, it's a balance of spiritual and scientific. My degree is in science, so there always has to be that sort of level of logic to my beliefs. But then I look to the spiritual for the things that science cannot describe or explain. And that's always been the case, and I'll touch on that later, even when I didn't follow the same faith that I do now. But definitely animism. Everything has energy, even if it's not a living, breathing thing. Another thing that I do, so when I was looking and writing down my answers to this, I got to polytheism, and then I was looking into the differences, just sort of refreshing myself about the difference between soft and hard polytheism. And that's something that me and my partner have talked a lot about, like when we were both sort of discovering our own personal practices. But for me, I kind of came up with the term over medium polytheism. And maybe, I don't know, maybe this isn't a thing. I don't know. But I wouldn't really say that I believe in soft polytheism or hard polytheism. I think that for me, across all cultures, whatever moon goddess or deity there is, I believe it's the same energy that presents itself in different ways. Because if you look across different cultures, there's usually like a deity that, like for the moon, the sun, the ocean, war, a motherly sort of deity. And again, this is also something that I'm not really too stressed out about really nailing down the specifics and the details of what I believe. It's just something that I just feel, and it's okay if it doesn't really have a label. Yeah. I mean, for example, like I follow a moon deity, and I have a friend that follows another moon deity, and at the end of the day, it is moon energy that has presented itself in different ways to the two of us. So, is it actually the same deity? And that would be considered hard polytheism? I don't know. That's just sort of what I feel. And if a deity presents itself to you in a specific way, that's not to say that it's not what you're feeling. You know, like my deity is, you know, the form that I do see, just as my friend over here, like their deity is theirs. Like neither is incorrect. They're both correct. Does anyone else kind of feel like there's somewhere in between soft and hard polytheism? That was a really interesting sort of, I guess, discovery. Over medium polytheism. But there, like I mentioned, there is some psychological in there as well, because I like to see things in a scientific and psychological perspective, and it's sort of, that keeps me grounded for sure. I like logic and I like reason and I like having explanations for things, but I also enjoy not being able to explain everything that I am feeling or thinking or experiencing. So it's really that balance between the psychological and the spiritual. Okay. I'm going to have to go faster. I feel like my camera's going to cut off if I take too long. Question 3. What culture or cultures is your practice rooted in? So, like I mentioned earlier, I am definitely open to exploring open practices, but for the most part, mine follows a Celtic theme. My deity is Welsh, and I did also work with a Norse deity when I first started out as well. So it's really, a lot of my answers I feel like are going to be, it doesn't really fit into one box, which is fine. It is what has resonated with me. There are deities that I've worked with that I no longer work with. There are deities that I'm open to working with. It's just something that is going to evolve over time, and I'm not going to set any firm boundaries except that it be an open practice. But for the most part, I would say Celtic, but a little bit of everything. Question 4, how long have you been practicing and how did it all start? So I have sort of touched on this in other videos, but if this is the first video of mine that you're watching, where to begin? For my witchy practice, that really first began in 2018. That was when I was interested in exploring a pagan path. I was interested in tarot and was looking into Wicca and tried that out for a bit. I knew that I did follow a moon goddess, but after exploring Wicca for a while, like a couple months, maybe a couple weeks, I realized that I did not really resonate with the male deity. And I think that came from a history in growing up Christian as well. I just did not feel called to work with a male deity. So, but at the time, excuse me, I thought that that was all there is. I thought it was Wicca or nothing, which is not the case. And there's definitely more information on that nowadays. But back then, I didn't really explore much. I just kind of thought that that was what it either was or it wasn't Wicca. And then I had a really big life change. We moved halfway around the world, so I kind of put my practice on pause until fall of 2020. I don't think there was really anything specific that sort of started my practice. It was honestly just a conversation with some other friends, and we were sort of, talking about like witchy things, and just one day I felt like we all just kind of agreed that we would kind of go on this adventure together, and we all had different deities, we all have very different practices, but it was so nice to kind of have that group of friends that you had already known and were sort of exploring a new side of yourself together. We didn't really do many spells together or anything. It was just kind of like we were solitary, but talking about it together. So that was really great. That was when I was in touch with the moon goddess again. And at the time I didn't know her name, so I was working to discover who she really was. And I did, and then I got into tarot, and it was a lot of just sort of looking into what I could do as a witch and doing what sounded good. And that's still kind of what I do. Even more so nowadays, I really do enjoy like crafting my own spells instead of really following guides for spells. Yeah, that was a very long answer. but I've been practicing, I would say solidly for 2 years now, and that's how it all started. Number 5, what books did you start with? Would you recommend them today? So there were a few books that I got a couple months in, but really the biggest thing that I used to start was Pinterest. And I would still recommend free online sources. You don't have to go out and buy every book of the sun under the sun you can, but another part of my practice is if you have free resources, utilize them. So I would definitely still recommend Pinterest. It can be sort of overwhelming at first, and you may get a lot of conflicting information. So my recommendation would be to, if you do go more on like the internet side, try to find many different sources and see what is more of the consensus or what resonates with you. And utilize libraries. That's something I still do to this day. I was fortunate enough that when we moved back to the States, I had a library that had really good books on different sort of witchy pagan subjects. But if you do not live in an area where your library has an abundance of that sort of information, even if you have a library card, I do recommend Hoopla and Libby. Those are both free apps that you just need to have a library card. And there's ebooks, audiobooks, all sorts of things on there. I'm actually listening to like 2 or 3 different audiobooks through Hoopla right now. And that's definitely saved me money, and it saved me from spending money on books that I ended up not liking, which is good. But as far as physical books for a beginner, as far as general witchy things, if you are interested in herbs, I would recommend The Green Witch. I'm sorry if this is backwards. This is The Green Witch by Arin, Murphy, Hiscock. This is really the only source on herbs that I will probably ever use. There's really good glossaries in the back. All sorts of associations. There's recipes. There's information on all sorts of things in here. So definitely recommend that for herbs. If you're interested in the moon phases, I would say that you can find online pretty easily. Wouldn't say you necessarily need a book just on the moon, but if you're interested in doing spell work in alignment with the moon, I really like this one. This is Moon Spells by Diane Ahlquist. I believe I'm saying that correctly. How to use the phases of the moon to get what you want. There's really, really great information on here, and the biggest thing that I've learned as far as spell work goes is you don't need every ingredient. Make it your own. So that is something I will say. Let me just find a random one here. I mean, she talks about altars, she talks about health. Yeah, so each spell talks about necessary enhancements and magical tools. Like different colored candles you can use, different formations, so like a circle, a triangle, a square, different directions to face, the best moon phase to do this spell, the best day of the week. Then there's optional additions like gemstones, incense, and music. And then before you begin, just what to kind of do to sort of get into that space. An affirmation to read, and then how to perform the spell. So I will say that I really like this book because it has like the tools that are more necessary, and then there's optional things. So you can do as little or as much as you want, depending on what you enjoy using in your practice. So I really do like that. I'm really not a fan of spells that need like 12 different ingredients and very specific things. At the end of the day, I'm sure you have something in your home or in your cabinet that will work. That's something that I found in the 2 years of doing different spells. So if you're interested in doing magic alongside the moon spells is a good one. If you're interested in tarot, Modern Witchcraft, Book of Tarot by Skye Alexander. I love this one to learn the basics of tarot. As far as a resource on YouTube, I personally used the channel Mystic Rainn. Love her channel. She's got a great beginner series on all the majors, all the minors. I'll try to remember to link her down below, but I used this book and her channel to learn tarot, and I just took notes. I have some other books here. What did I start with? I mean, I also started with like Wicca candle magic, but again, I don't describe myself as Wicca. Would I recommend it today? I mean, yeah, because I've got some bookmarked here, and I mean, it talks about very similar things as the moon spells book. It talks about the moon phase, but also, so the one I have tabbed is like employment victory spell. So like when you apply for a job and you want a little extra boost to get the job. It says, if you work the spell during a waxing moon, focus on the beginning of the job. If you work it during a waning moon, focus on winnowing away the competition from other applicants. And I love that because it's not like you have to do this one spell on this one day of the week during this one moon phase. You can do it ideally, I'm sure it said a day of the week, but you can do it on either of those phases, and just it's that change in your phrasing and your visualization, which I love. So yeah, so I would recommend this one. I mean, it's a thin one. I mean, if you can find it, cool, but if not, I wouldn't say it's absolutely necessary. This is by Lisa Chamberlain. Don't know if I want to talk about this one since I haven't really read it. Yeah, I'm not going to talk about that one. Okay. Question 6. Oh my gosh, my camera is definitely going to cut out. Okay, question 6. How has your practice or paradigm changed over time? This is going to be a long one too. Okay, I'm going to try to go fast. I was baptized when I was born. Raised Methodist. Did not prescribe to that as growing up. I just didn't get it. I like literally did not understand what I was learning about each week. So we stopped going. In the beginning of college, I had a very hard time adjusting to that big life change. So I had some friends invite me to a Bible study, and just having that sort of otherworldly energy, accept me and my flaws, is what I needed. I needed something outside of myself to tell me that I was loved and that I was okay. So for a couple years in college, I was Christian, non-denominational. As time went on, I had started out going to a very small church, and they got bigger and bigger and bigger. So the focus sort of slipped away for me. So the larger that particular church got, the less interested in, and the more I felt I was like, they're getting away from why I got here, why I started this. So I stopped going. And then about a year later was when I was first interested in paganism, witchcraft, but then moved. So it's changed a lot. I do still have my Bible. I think it's very interesting to kind of refer back to. My whole thought about that religion has changed, even just since believing and then not believing in it. I definitely believe Jesus existed. Other than that, I don't like the deity. Not a fan of the Father. I'm going to leave it at that. But I loved learning about different religions in college. I took a religious studies course one semester. It was fascinating, just learning about other religions that I had not really been exposed to before. So it's still something that I enjoy doing, learning about other religions as long as they are open. So it's changed a lot. Question 7, what does your daily or regular practice look like? Even this has changed since I began. Right now, at this moment in time, I don't have a daily practice. I don't force myself to do anything. I just do what feels natural day to day. Usually that involves some sort of tarot or card reading. Usually involves like tea and like drinking a warm beverage at my altar and just sort of meditating on my energy. I might light a candle, I might burn some incense, and I'll chat with my deity. I may journal, but it's really just however much I feel like doing in a day is what I will do. As far as outside of daily, like regularly, I do try to cleanse and protect my space regularly. It's something that I don't do as regularly anymore, and that's honestly just because when I first started my practice, we lived overseas in an area that had a lot of energetic activity. So I needed to do monthly cleansing and protection of our home. I had to, or stuff would get in, and that was not fun. I had some negative experiences, so I was very adamant about doing a very, very strong protection every month, maybe even twice a month if I needed to. Then when we moved, the last place we were at, I really only had to do a strong cleansing and protection like once or twice. In our new space, I haven't really done anything because I haven't felt the need to. If I do ever feel the need to, I absolutely will. And then I do work with the moon phases, the cycles, but I don't even put a ton of pressure on myself with that either, even though my deity is a moon deity. Life gets in the way. And when I put too much pressure on myself, it takes the joy out of it. And the phase will come again in a month. So if I forget, I forget. And each phase lasts 3 days, so I usually try to think about it on the first day, plan out what I want to do. If I have the energy and time to do it, I'll do it on the first day, but I've got 2 more days if I don't. Number 8, are there aspects of your craft that you keep secret? Do you think secrecy is important? Yes and yes. As far as my craft, I keep most of it secret to those who don't already know. I have recently gotten a couple questions from family and friends, and I tell them what I'm comfortable with, that I use, like that I use tarot for self-reflection and meditation, or things like that. As far as social media goes, I do share readings on social media. I try to not get too personal, and I only share if I feel okay with doing it. I'm not going to force myself to share anything that is very, very deep and personal. And as far as others having secrecy in their practice, I think protection is the biggest thing. So as long as you have the protective wards or whatever on yourself, that's the biggest thing. But I would say that a certain level of secrecy is important. just for protection. You know, you don't want things getting used against you. So, number 9, what are your favorite tools? Cards, for sure. My 2 favorites are the Smith-Waite Centennial and my Ethereal Visions. I'm just gonna flip through just a couple. I mean, it's nothing super crazy, but these are the 2 decks that I learned tarot with. And tarot is a big part of my practice for self-reflection and growth. So this deck, and then I'll flip through the Ethereal Visions really quickly. But other than those, other tools that I love are candles. I've got like at least 3 lit right now on my altar. But also smoke cleansing or other forms of energetic cleansing are really important. I will say be very careful with smoke cleansing if you do choose to do that. If you have pets or little ones at home, just make sure that there is good airflow and that you're not burning too much. Smoke, and then black salt is a really good one that I like to use for protection. And also my grimoire. I do consider that a tool. It is ever evolving because that is what I am adding myself. I'm like making it my own while I go. So, yeah, these are the 2 tarot decks that are my favorite tools. I don't have like a wand or an athame right now. I'm not opposed to getting one. I just need to make sure that it resonates with me. And I'll know when I find it. So, last question, number 10, what books would you recommend to newbies? Again, whatever topics you're interested in, I would just, especially if you can, use your library or those apps that I mentioned, Hoopla or Libby. Read a lot. Because the more you read, the more you're going to figure out what works for you and what does not. And I think the more perspectives that you read that don't resonate with what you believe, the better, because it's still learning. Not everything you read has to align with what you believe. Again, just be careful that you're reading things about open practices. It's okay to learn about closed practices, just I would not recommend actually doing them, but it's really fascinating to learn about. So if there is a particular branch of practice that resonates with you, I definitely recommend historic texts. It can be dense, but it's fun. And so I would also recommend looking into the indigenous tribes of where you live, and at least acknowledging that you reside on that land. Depending on where that is, there may not be much information, or it may be closed. So just be very careful with that. But yeah, historic texts are great. They're really fun. My partner has like the Icelandic saga, because they're more Norse pagan, so they've got a bunch of like Norse historic texts, which are really fun to just learn about and talk about. So I think that is it. Thank you guys for joining me. Hopefully the video didn't cut up. If it did, I'll try to patch it together. Let me know if you have done a VR. I'd love to check it out. Thank you to Mnomquah for starting this. Thank you to everyone who has done a VR, including my friend Jess over at Jess Reads Cards, Candy at Candy Soul and Soil, and Astral Lady Tarot. Thank you guys so much for doing your VRs. You guys inspired me to do my own. So with that said, thank you guys for joining me. And before you go, please remember, you matter, you are loved, and you can make a difference.